Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, and welcome to MindShifters Radio with Dr. Michael Ryce, the Forgiveness Doctor. We're here every Monday through Friday from 1 to 2 Eastern Time, and we want to welcome you to our show today. And the call-in number is 646-200-4169. So please call in with your questions. Dr. Ryce.
Well, thank you, Jeannie, and welcome everybody to post-Valentine's Day, an awesome day for the presence of love in the world, and we're here to make every day of your life Valentine's Day. That's what our goal is, that there's the actual presence of love in your physiology, in your relationships, in your business dealings, in your world, 24/7, 365. And today, I have the thought to talk a little bit about the real thing. Now, of course, most people's brain cells fire with some programming from the culture of somebody that spends billions of dollars to tell people that sugar and caffeine and phosphoric acid are good for them. I'm not so sure I'm in agreement with that, but I want to talk about the real thing from the Aramaic perspective. The foundation of our work is the ancient Aramaic language, which, interestingly enough, is the root language of at least 5 of the world's major religions. However, it's not a religious language, and it's a physics language. So we want to look at the real thing. What's behind what the Greeks told us? The Greeks didn't tell us the whole story. They only told us part of the story. So, and my thought was to start off with the really super, extremely, I can't say enough superlatives about how important this topic is. And the topic in Aramaic is prayer. Now, there'll be a whole faction of the society that will recoil in, pain at the thought of prayer, and there'll be others that'll think, oh, yeah, I do that all the time. I put my order into the Cosmic Gift Catalog just on a regular basis, every day, in fact. And if you go to the Aramaic language, what you'll find is that that's not what prayer means. It's got nothing to do with telling the Creator what the Creator should be doing for you tomorrow. Got nothing to do with your order into the Cosmic Gift Catalog. That's petition, and it's perfectly fine to petition, but prayer is a whole different thing in Aramaic. The word in Aramaic means to set a trap for God. And when you think about that, people go, set a trap for God? Whoa, how ridiculous is that? What does that mean? Well, if you think of it in terms of what we've been talking about with our show, and that we are energy systems, that the world is made of energy, then you realize that the energy systems that we are, of course, energy systems have antennas. For instance, you have a TV at home, and then you've got a TV antenna, and it's just the perfect antenna. It's aligned properly. And you get an absolutely beautiful, crisp, clear picture and sound for, your favorite station, whatever it happens to be. Well, in our terms in Aramaic, which is a physics language, the word to set a trap for, it's exactly what the antenna is doing on your television set. It's trapping a signal from your favorite station, bringing it in with power and clarity to express through the television into the world. Well, I would offer that the real thing is that human beings, and we all start out there. If you ask anybody on the planet to imagine holding a newborn, and if they tap into the essence of that newborn, the word that will describe the essence of that newborn will be some variation on the theme of love. And we're told in the ancient scriptures that the Creator is love, that the underpinning frequency, the underpinning energy of the universe is that of love. It's kind of like the cosmic glue. It's what holds things together. And once you recognize that the Creator is love and that you're made of that stuff, you're made in the image and likeness of that, then you might start to realize that the purpose of your physiology is to set a trap for love. That if you are properly aligned, if you have no interfering patterns in you, then your essential nature will express through your physiology, and you will, 24/7, 365, trap the active presence of love, and therefore be the active presence of love in the world. I'd offer that's our human function. And, of course, our culture has taught us to move a long way away from that. And what we're working to do is to get people on the long road back to being the active presence of love in the world. So literally, on an energetic level, I'd offer that the bony structure of your head, your spine, your pelvis, legs, etc., are literally the antenna system of our so-called bodies. And they are what is designed to bring love into the world. If we fall out of alignment, then maybe we're not experiencing that. We feel other things. And I have people say, well, gee, if the Creator's love and I am love, and in love I live, move, and have my being, and I'm a trap for love, why don't I feel it? Well, if you have some other gods, you get to worship whatever gods you want. If you think the God of rage is going to do better for you than love, if you think the God of fear is going to do better for you, if you think criticism, condemnation, gossip, slander, vengeance is better for you, well, you have every right to do that. Your business. And you'll get to feel the effects of that in your physiology. Whatever you choose to engage in is what gets stored energetically in your structure. So the real thing I would offer when it comes to prayer is that I am designed to be the energy space in which the active presence of love shows up. And when we extend that to each other, there's an awesome quote that someone sent me recently from Gerald Jampolsky. Gerald Jampolsky is a psychiatrist, and Gerald said that if he had the opportunity to rewrite the whole diagnostic manual for the psychiatric industry, and believe me, it is an industry, it would be one line long, and here's what it would be. If you are not experiencing yourself, this is a psychiatrist, mind you, saying this. This isn't Michael Ryce. Here's a psychiatrist saying, if you are not experiencing yourself as love and sharing that love with everyone you meet, you're insane. That's his definition as a psychiatrist of insanity. And I absolutely concur with him. And then, of course, we get to say things like, well, yeah, but I love humanity. It's just the people that bother me. Yeah, that's right. The people that show up in your life are going to show you the content of your mind that you worship more than the presence of love in your field. And they will show it to you over and over and over until you finally decide to forgive. And that doesn't mean let them off the hook for what you're feeling. That means that if that person shows up and brings your God of rage or fear or grief or pain up in you, then you apply forgiveness to your grief, your rage, your fear, your pain to get rid of it. You don't apply forgiveness to them. You don't apply forgiveness to yourself. That's the technology, the core technology we're working with, is the Aramaic tool of forgiveness. So, Jeannie, any callers on the line, or should we go into another topic? Any questions in the chat room?
Don't have any questions. We've got several people that are just listening in. Nobody has flagged that they have a question. And
awesome. Well, if you have a question.
One of the things that I just thought of as you were talking about, the oneness and the post-Valentine and being love and everything is on our website we have a thing, and it's actually the address directly to it is whyagain, WHYAGAIN.com/one, ONE.PHP. And this is a collection of animals that act the way humans are supposed to act as one.
Yeah, it's awesome. Stuff you've gathered there, I particularly like. If you listen to this show and you have not seen the story of Christian the Lion, go to our site, look under that connection, that /one.php, and look at the story of Christian the Lion. Christian is a lion that two young men in England had in their apartment until it was too big to take care of. They flew it to Africa, let it go at a game preserve. A year later, they go back, and the video shows these two fellas and the game preserve manager watch as this huge male lion comes bounding down the hill at them. And, of course, my thought at that moment was, golly, I hope this is the right lion. And this huge male jumps up on these guys and licks on them and kisses them and nuzzles them, and, I mean, literally is hugging them. And, of course, people say, no, the lion has to eat the man. That's what they naturally do. Excuse me. It's not what they naturally do. All of this garbage that humans are playing out, we are structured to do. We are programmed to do by our generations. And the lion is programmed to attack. But there's another level of this story of Christian the Lion, because as he comes bounding in to meet his old friend, the female, who's normally the hunter, comes in with him, walks over to these two men that she would normally tear to pieces and have lunch, and they're able to pet the female, who's totally, completely wild, never been exposed to humans. There is a power in the active presence of love, and there is a power in someone leading others to that. This Christian the Lion leads with love to these two that would, at least people would say normally in the wild, would be enemies. And the female follows his lead. How many people in our culture are following the lead of those who function out of viciousness, out of hatred, out of vengeance? I've spoken a couple of times before, and I'm inviting people to think about their leaders in different terms. But there are a couple of gentlemen that started a campaign 2 years ago for, it was called, Civility Project. The Civility Project. And they invited everybody in the world, but they particularly went and approached and promoted 535 members of Congress and 50 or so, 50 governors from around the country, asking them to sign a pledge of civility. Function like a human being. If you don't agree with somebody, would you function in a civil way toward them? They shut the project down. Why did they shut the project down? Out of almost 600 so-called leaders I'd offer, there's a big question mark there. He was able to find 3 human lives. He was able to get 3 people who would sign a civility pledge. And I would offer that the active presence of love is a human life. Hostility, fear, grief, pain does not reflect human life. And when we function out of those things, we've given our human lives away. And so let's start to look to our leaders and invite them to function truly as human beings, as the active presence of love, rather than the garbage that's called leadership, that is rage and fear and gossip-based and hate-based. It's time for the hate mongers to give up hate. It's time for us to wake up to who we are. Gentlemen, ladies, you are the active presence of love. Reclaim a human life. Let's get back on track. Lead our country out of a human life and back into the expression of human lives throughout the culture. Imagine what our culture would be, imagine what our country would be if we had 300 million people all functioning out of the active presence of love. Where would we be as a society?
Then we'd have other people following us.
Yes, I believe that's exactly what we do. And so that's what we're here to do, is to invite and support people in doing that in the world, rather than the craziness that passes as a human life these days.
Exactly. Call-in number is 646-200-4169. And he's not marked that he has a question, but Terry, I just put you on the line.
Hey, guys.
How are you doing,
welcome.
Terry?
This is Terry, yes. I'm doing great. We've got some sunshine here in the Ozarks, listening into the show, appreciating all your information and thinking about what you were saying. I watched an interesting movie from Netflix last night. It's called Antonia's Line. It's a foreign film, and Antonia was this matriarch figure in a village, Dutch village, and it goes through the lineage of her family over 4 generations. And there were some aspects of it that I really liked, that there was a real communal sense there, and they had a community relationship. However, there were there was a lot of less than love interactions, it was like a condensed version of every atrocity that man's ever committed. And at the same time, there was that underlying presence of love. And it impacted me pretty strongly, and I tapped into a deeper understanding of love as a very worthy goal. How do we spread love, get love, invite people in that want to really connect from a space of love and create community and interaction with each other. And I was thinking along those same lines of what you just offered. What would it be like to live in that kind of space and to focus on that as opposed to focusing on the negative and all the news and the control, the huge obstacles that are placed out there by our non-beingness,
Right.
So
yeah, we do it. We do it to ourselves for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And reclaiming a human life, as you talk about spreading love, truth is all of the love that's ever existed in the world is still here. Our human presence is still within us. It's just that sadly we cover it up with the hostilities and fears, the thumbprints that the world puts on us. And so that's why, we're doing, and of course those who haven't met Terry is the artist in residence at Heartland and contractor community builder. And what we find is that if you're stuck out of that presence of love, that there's difficulty. And so why do we travel around the country and around the globe doing free workshops on forgiveness? Because forgiveness is the way you remove what is unlike love. And that's all you really need to do. You don't have to, as we talked about in yesterday's show, that song, looking for love in all the wrong places. You don't have to look under every rock and every nook and cranny and every skirt that you see, but rather if you start looking within yourself and you begin the journey of removing the generational patterns and what I like to call the good old family feeling. Many people, simply because that's what's structured in them, just, if things get too good and the good old family feeling says there's supposed to be strife, well, they'll jump right in with a nasty word or a nasty thought, and there we are, back at strife again. And so what does one do if they find themselves, things are getting too good in their lives, so they create some strife? Well, you look at that dynamic in yourself of strife, and you now start to apply the forgiveness process. And the forgiveness process that we teach is the exact opposite of what our culture teaches. Forgiveness has nothing to do with letting other people off the hook because of what's going on in you. Forgiveness is the tool with which you remove what's going on inside of you. And once you do that, there's nothing left but you, your love. That's it. That's what you'll get to experience. And so that's what we're here to do.
Well, that's awesome, Michael. I was struggling with understanding what it was that moved me about that film last night. And I just let it go after a little bit, And as you were talking, it just fell right into place. That was a perfect example of life without tools, because what was depicted was the underlying, what's underneath it all. There is this love and this desire, and they kept going back to there's just this life keeps living, life wants to express. Yet all these terrible things were happening, generated by the people. So life itself is always pushing forward, or love is our underlying covered upness there. Yeah, that's great. That's what I was struggling to tap into about what was it about that film that moved me so deeply, and that's exactly what was going on there.
Well, you'll have to text me the name of the film. I'm driving right now, so I can't get it down. But if you text it to me, I think I'll check it out. And there's a really awesome line in the Course in Miracles that says there are really only two things, and that is there's love and there's a cry for love. That what is love in expression in our world is those people who have so much pain and trauma that they're screaming and raging out. Why do they scream and rage out? Because that's what's contained in their physiology, is that screaming and raging. And so that comes out as a cry for is there anybody in town that could be the active space of love for me? And I say this from working in the prison system, whether it's with the 6'8", 280-pound toughest guy, I wouldn't want to meet him in a dark alley, or whether it's the tough girl, the tough kid, and 9 years of age in the jails in Arizona. The last prison we were in was in Arizona with 9-year-old children. And, the underlying desire is I need to pray. I need to be the expression of love in the world. And you want to watch these kids. We worked with 109 to 16-year-old kids that just were just so softened and so warmed and so, show me that. And then I remember we used to have in Albany, Georgia, a classroom setting where we taught laws of living, and this was it was a pretrial release program where people would come out of prison. And there's this guy who's, about as gnarly looking, about as tough looking as anybody I have ever seen. And he's about 280, 6'6". And I'll never forget the day he bounded into the classroom. He bounded in like an excited 3-year-old child. And my former partner's name was Dan McDougall, and everybody called him Mr. Mac. And this guy comes in now. He'd just been on a pretrial release program. He spent most of his life in prison. And he's got this grin on his face and this excitement in his voice and a lilt in his step. Mr. Mac, I was able to keep love present, Rachma, the word we use from the Aramaic. I was able to keep Rachma present all week this week. And he was so excited, so delighted with himself and his experience. And probably something he'd never seen in his life until he got into prison and laws of living. And all of a sudden in the prison system, there in front of him, Dan McDougall, the active presence of love, teaching people how to let go of the rage, the fear, the hostility, so that they can reclaim a human life. If we were to I would love to take that program into Congress and sit with Congress. Take them through laws of living, the same as the prison, guys in the prison, and give them a direct experience of the actual active presence of the love of God in their physiology. Watch what happens to our country. I would love to go there. I would love to take it there. And it's just time for us as humans to wake up, back up to our human lives and to be restored to that. The real thing, prayer, that is to set a trap for God, to become the active presence of love in the world. And that's what we're here with MindShifters Radio to support you in. And if you're not familiar with our forgiveness process, then go to www.why, again, AGAIN.com. On the right-hand side, you'll see a thing that says Download Worksheets. And the first item there is a copy of Chapter 24 of my book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? It's a full description of the forgiveness process. Jump on, catch that description, start doing worksheets. Watch how hostility and fear start to drop and disappear from your life. We were just, there was a young woman that was over here a couple of weeks ago in Florida from Spain, and she was from England. Had been going through a lot of trauma, had been in therapy over there. And she did about, I think, 5 or 6 of our workshops and a MindShifters and Still Point Breathing workshop. So she just flew back, and she went to see her therapist. And she went into her therapist's office, and the first thing her therapist said is, after a couple of minutes of conversation, it's like, what happened to you while you were over there? You're a different human being. Like, I don't even know who you are. The active presence of love changes everything. And that's what we're here to support you in. Any other thoughts, Terry? Jeannie, any other calls?
I had one other point. Am I still on?
Yes, you are.
Yes, sir, you're still on. You're here.
Can you give an update of this week's schedule for workshops and all?
Actually, there aren't. Friday night, we've got one event this week at this point, and that's Friday night. We'll be speaking at a temple. Had a meeting about 2 weeks ago with the rabbi that's local here, and he invited us to come. And so Friday night we're going to speak at his temple service, and then on Saturday we'll be the following Wednesday we'll be doing Why Is This Happening to Me Again? So at this point, that's the only thing that's scheduled for.
We have a tentative
for
at the Unity in Pompano, but it's not set yet. So everybody just keep watching the website.
Yeah, we may be doing a thing the first week in March at Unity in Pompano. That's what we're working toward, but some things are perhaps interfering, so we're not. But that's actually on the website at this moment, but it's tentative. So keep an eye on the schedule. We will be doing more while we're in South Florida. We've had several people that have done the MindShifters and Still Point Breathing workshops twice while we've been here. It's something that we usually only do about once every 3 months. And we've done 2 of them, and it looks like we're going to do still a third before we leave here, but we haven't set a date yet for another MindShifters and Still Point Breathing. So any other thoughts, Terry? Okay. Jeannie, any calls? Anything in the chat room?
There's a lot of people that are coming in and out, but nobody's asking any questions yet. So just
okay. Well, I want to go on with the. I got another piece for the real thing. You know, we talked about prayer as the active to set a trap for God, that we become the active presence of love, and that's the true meaning of the word prayer. And then I'm going to go to the opposite end of the spectrum, because there's a fun word that is so misinterpreted and misunderstood in our culture. And if people get the real thing, it changes their lives very dramatically. And that word is sin. Now, sin in this culture, many people have made the mistake of making it an identity that you should buy into. You are sin, you are a sinner, and if you just claim that, then things will get better in your life. I haven't seen too many people that have experienced better as a result of that, frankly. But the term in Aramaic is quite different from what the Greeks want us to believe. It's got nothing to do with an identity. The word sin actually is an archery term. And when you fired at the target and you missed the bullseye, the scorekeeper would yell, sin, you're off the mark. Like positive feedback as in take another shot, not buy this identity for yourself for life and that's part of your being, quote-unquote, saved. No, that's not it at all. That's a Greek idea of people who would love to keep us in hostility and fear, to keep us out of our human lives. Be restored to a human life, the active presence of love. That's your nature, that's your character. Your nature and your character has nothing to do with that word sin. All that is when you bring in an energy that doesn't belong within your physiology, you have sinned. You're off the mark. You've made an error. And so when you recognize that the idea here is to see when your energy is defiling your perception, defiling your physiology, defiling your human life, then you stop. And here's another one. Let's go with another, the real thing. Repent. Now, that's been presented by the Greeks as well. Just get into your sorry state. Excuse me. Sorry is based in fear. It'll take you farther and farther away from the active presence of love. It's got nothing to do with sorry. The word repent in Aramaic is to turn in another direction, to look another way. If we're looking at what's going on in our genetics, in our bloodline, and what's going on in our world, we're going to get locked into a creative process of reproducing exactly that. When you recognize that repent simply means turn another direction, you can't turn away from creatorship. You are a creator, but you can turn toward and embrace your human life. If there's rage and fear and grief and someone comes along and activates or resonates your rage, your fear, and your grief, it will tend to scream so loudly that you'll tend to turn toward it again. And to develop the discipline of, no, I'm going to turn toward my human life rather than the content of my carbon-based memory. And then out of my human life, I'm going to return to my physiology, my carbon-based memory, my biology, and I'm going to recognize that what's in there doesn't belong there, and I'm going to begin to forgive. I'm going to begin to remove it. So the real thing, forgiveness, nothing to do with letting others off the hook. It is a tool. It is a technology. It is a very surprising how-to once you begin to understand it. It's how to remove what never belonged in human physiology. That is, to remove every sin, everything that keeps us from living as the active presence of love and therefore having a human life. whole different process once you start to engage the Aramaic. It's so awesome. And it gives you a way to really, truly move off of the center of the culture that's based in so much hostility and fear, and to become truly centered in a human life, a life that no matter what's going on around it, expresses and experiences the active presence of love. And the refusal to give up your human life for anything, no matter what anybody's doing. It's an awesome process to do that. Any questions in the chat room, Jeannie?
No, there's not. There had been some conversation. Well, first of all, I'm not sure. I know that you're on the road there, and there's not a whole lot you can do about road noise, but it almost sounds like there's wind blowing in your microphone, so it's very choppy sounding. But anyway, there was some conversation at one of the workshops about needing to have to hold on to fear and anger, and that it was like a yin and a yang, that you had to have it. And you had held some conversation about that. Could you add on to that as far as like staying in love, that the other is unnecessary, that it's not required to be fearful to keep yourself safe, or not required to be able to get that adrenaline rush to push you out of the way or whatever? Can you add into that?
Oh, sure. That's really right on track, because the culture tells us that, well, you're not safe if you don't have your rage to beat up on somebody with. And I would offer, when you start to look at it from the point of view of physics, when you choose rage, you set up a frequency. If you look at animals, for instance, there'll be a dozen people in a group, and there's a dog that has a tendency to be vicious. Who, 100% of the time, is the dog going to run over and bite? It's going to bite the person with fear. It's going to bite the person that's in disturbance. And so we are creative beings out of the energies and the frequencies that we engage in. And when you look at the idea of energetically what you're putting out, the person who's in rage, they're broadcasting continuously, hey, I need somebody to come and show me something to do with rage. And, of course, there's always going to be a volunteer. Somebody's always going to show up. The reverse of that is your safety lies. There's another great lesson in the Course in Miracles that says, in my defenselessness, my power and safety lie. When I let go of defenses, when I let go of the need to protect myself, I'm no longer setting up an attack. Well, what do you mean if I want to protect myself, I'm no longer setting up? There are horrible people out there, and I need to protect myself against somebody coming and punching me in the nose. Well, so what you'll see is that there's a high energy wave. A fellow named Marcel Vogel, who's a 23-year senior scientist from IBM. Marcel had the instrumentation in the laboratory with which to take a picture of the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. If you're holding, I have to protect myself against somebody coming and punching me in the nose, then what you're setting up is a frequency that says, hey, is there anybody out there that could come and punch me in the nose? And guess who's coming to dinner? Somebody's going to show up to play it out with you. In your defenselessness, when there is no defense, when there is no sword, when there is no shield, you have nothing to invite attack in. And what happens is people who live in the world of defense and attack are just complementary parts of the same energy, and they always meet each other. They always find a way to fall into each other's space because the universe is governed by a law of resonance. One of the first lessons when we started the Lessons in Living course in the school in Delray Beach, 25 years ago, here in Florida, there's a Unity school, and we began a thing that was called Lessons in Living. And the first lesson that we went in from kindergarten to grade 8 was, when I choose love, it wakes up the love in everyone. On an energetic level, obviously, like is going to resonate like. You know, if I take a middle C tuning fork and I hit it on a desk and I put it in front of the second tuning fork, the second tuning fork is going to be energized by the presence of the field coming off of that other middle C. If I put a middle A tuning fork in front of the middle C, nothing's going to happen. There will be no transfer of energy between the two because there's no resonance. Do you suppose then, if that's true, that love would resonate and tend to attract love? that fear and rage and attack would tend to attract attack. I'd offer that's exactly what's going to happen. And so let's change our frequency, folks. That's really the bottom line of it all, is literally changing our frequencies and moving back to the experience and the presence of a true human life, the active presence of love.
Awesome. And we have Dr. Tim Hayes with us. Tim, you're on.
Well, hello, Jeannie. Hello, Michael.
Hey there, Dr. Tim. For those who don't know Dr. Tim, he's a MindShifters support group leader up in Crystal Lake, just outside of Chicago. Been doing a support group up there with this work for the last 5 years, and we love it when you call in, sir.
Well, I just had to chime in here because we get this in the support group from time to time. People actually leave the group because they're very defensive about their anger. They think that it's an important part of life. The yin and the yang comment made me key into this. And so I just wanted to mention that what I've learned from you and several other important spiritual teachers is it does have a use. My anger does have a use. It has the same use as an alarm in a high-rise when it goes off. It's alerting me to the fact that I'm making a mistake. Yep. And when the alarm goes off, I don't want to just go to sleep. I want to take action to remove the difficulty that set the alarm off, whether it was a false alarm or a real fire or some other hazard. I want to get to work to relieve that problem. And my anger serves a function in the physical world to trigger fight or flight so I can survive physically. And in the mental emotional world, it provides the tool of telling me I'm making a mistake. And so there's your yin and your yang from my perspective, that anger and frustration and sadness and hurt, these are very good things as long as I know what to do with them and as long as I use them as an indication that I'm making a mistake.
Well, and as long as I choose, once I become aware of it, that my mistake is there and I forgive, and I start to remove that energy because it creates destructive energy in the cell as well. And Tim, you kind of stimulate my thought too. There actually is another very powerful use for anger and rage and all those things, and that is it's to kill the people that don't really harmonize with the human life. It creates such destructive chemistry in the cell that it takes us out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, if we don't learn to use the tools. If we don't learn to use the tools, then it eats us up from the inside out and we die sooner. Precisely.
So it is useful there in taking people out who aren't really interested in living a human life. There's a wonderful commandment, and many people look at commandments, how ridiculous is that? Somebody's going to command me what to do, I'm going to do my own thing. It's like, well, do your own thing, but you're going to have a lot of collisions with the expression of the energetics of the universe if you don't understand how they go. And there's this awesome commandment that many people say, well, my parents were so terrible and so rotten, it's, why would I love them? But there's that command, love, and actually it's honor my mother and my father, and they understood the physics and the physiology, and this fits well with the thing you read to us yesterday from The Gentle Art of Blessing, where that honor thy father and thy mother is a command that if you want your days to be longer on the earth, then you bring the active presence of love into and offer it to your parents. And the more of a traumatic experience perhaps you had in childhood, the more important it is to honor your father and your mother, especially if they were, horrible to grow up with. Honor thy father and thy mother is to bring the active presence of love into behavior toward them. And what happens when you do that is it passes through the places in you where you hold hostility and fear from those relationships. And it starts to dissolve the hostility and fear. It's kind of like a solvent. It just goes in and starts to dissolve that hostility and fear. So, again, it's not a commandment of some creator that wants to control you and you better do this or else. It's a command that says, if you wish, here's the tool. If you want to live longer, honor the source of many of the traumas you have in your life. And it's usually, very often, it's mother and father. And as we begin to do that, what happens is we'll dissolve the hostilities and fears that have been passed from generation to generation. And we get to play a different game in our family system. It's time for us to go there.
Okay, Michael and Tim, I'm going to leave you on there too. I'm going to put something else that came through the chat room, and perhaps you can add to it. One person said, learning that anger is energy is helpful because you can transmute it into love. And then someone else felt that possibly it's still good, that anger is good, that it can move you up and through powerlessness and then move you past it.
Well, my input would be that while you could create a constructive use for it in that sense, you'll move there 1,000 times faster and 1,000 times healthier through the presence of your human life. I mean, it's not that you couldn't use it in that direction. It would still be destructive on the physiology, but you could, use it as a booster for that. But my input would be that if you did it from the presence of your human beingness, from your human life, it would move you forward 1,000 times faster.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would say
1,000 times more powerful.
That the only play that I would recommend that would be if it were an anger in response to a physical threat, in which case that's what it's there for. I give a lecture on anger being a survival level defense mechanism. And in that system, in our physical system, it works very efficiently to kick us into restructured breathing and blood flow and extra chemicals for strength and response to an imminent physical danger. And we are intended to go through that response and then, as soon as possible, go into a deep, loving relaxation response to recuperate from all of the trauma that's happened even internally. But it is not, as you're pointing out, Michael, a useful thing in the emotional realm because it just wasn't intended that way.
Right, and I would offer, and Tim, if you'd stay on the phone if you've got a few more minutes. Do you have another few minutes?
Yes.
Good, awesome. Because I'm actually getting ready to do another interview at 2 o'clock on WNN radio here in Boca Raton. It's all up and down the coast of Florida. And so I'm going to turn the radio show over to you, Tim, and Jeannie to complete, if you don't mind. But let me just share a story. We did share this the other day, but it's so powerful that there's still another level to that process. Yes, there is that in physiology. And to call forward the active presence of a human life will take you still to a whole different level where something different happens. And a few years back, I was in Unity Church in Marietta, Georgia. I taught there, several years, and I went in one Sunday morning to do their services, and a young lady came up to me. She said, "I'd like to thank you for saving my life." I was like, "What? Excuse me, I just got in here late last night. It wasn't me." And she's like, "Well, about 6 months ago," she said, "I came home and went into my apartment, and I had locked the door and found myself locked in my apartment with a man who had a knife who said he was going to rape me and kill me." She said, "I'd been at your workshop series the year before." She said, "I'd done a whole week of workshops with you, including the MindShifters and Still Point Breathing." And she said oftentimes since that series of workshops, she'd heard my voice in her head saying the words conscious, active, present love. And she said that she heard that in her head as this man is literally in the act of raping her and has a knife at her throat. And as she heard that in her head, she said something shifted in her, and she looked at him with different eyes, and rather than terror, she saw him through a different lens and could see the terror on his face and in his eyes. She said specifically, "I could just see terror in his eyes." And she said, "I knew that I was dead. I knew he was going to kill me. There was no question." And she said, at that moment, my death didn't matter. I just moved into total compassion for him. And she said, the instant that I looked at his face with compassion, he began to cry, dropped his knife, and ran out of my apartment. There's another level we humans can come at this from, rather than out of an animal response, rather than out of physiology. Yes, those responses are there. And most of the things, especially in our culture today, that response handles never happen. Most of them over things that have nothing to do with actual imminent danger and threat, although rarely it is. And, if you look at that story and that woman, the power of calling forth and being able to in that really, I mean, one of the most difficult situations that a woman could be in, that she has a totally different experience, the active presence of love, and it puts an end to a threat to her life.
Yeah, and if she had stayed in her fear, then possibly he would have still killed her.
Yeah, she was quite convinced that she would die. So if it works for you, Tim, if you could stay on the line with Jeannie, I'm going to go and get on WNN. I'm supposed to meet the producer of that show inside the building I'm at as we're speaking. And if you guys carry forward, we've got about...
We sure will.
Okay,
all right.
I love you. Tim, we appreciate you. Blessings.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Tim, we did have someone that also asked, is anger necessary in our involvement then as we're evolving into a higher being? I have often heard Michael speak of that anger is like an internal drug, that, when we're fearful or in pain, then we feel like we're weak and powerless. And so if we can kick into anger, then it makes us feel like we're more powerful and we have more control. So I've heard him refer to anger as just being a drug to cover the pain. How have you experienced that with some of your patients?
Well, much the same way. And the other important part of that situation is that most of the time we are trying to use a drug to numb out or escape from pain that we're not aware of. So we have unconscious pain, and as Michael talks about in several of his different lectures, whatever is the strongest resonant frequency within me, especially if it's unconscious, that's going to be the thing that determines my behavior. And many people don't understand the concept of unconscious pain, but our minds are so powerful that we can be working throughout the day and not at all aware of an unconscious pain, and at the end of the day, we can't wait to get a hold of a martini or a painkiller or, a big chocolate cake. And what we're using that for is to deny or suppress or numb out our experience of a pain that's happening on an unconscious level. And I would offer that that's what many people who are addicted to rage, and some people have actually coined the term rageaholic, that's what they're doing. They're justifying their rage based on something someone outside of them has said or done, but they're actually using it to avoid a pain they're not even aware they have.
Right. And so then using the other tools, the worksheets and such, help to uncover that hidden pain?
Well, and what it does then is it breaks the cycle, because if I use my rage to cope with a pain, conscious or otherwise, then I perpetuate that cycle. And as Michael talks about, I send out a high-frequency wave every time I think a thought. And so when I think thoughts of anger, I'm basically sending out an energy that attracts more anger and more situations that are anger-producing into my life. And I'm going to live with the results of the choices I make today, tomorrow, the next day, the next day. Way of Mastery is frequently talking about how, and Michael said this at the beginning of the talk, he said, we're conscious, we are always going to be a creator. And even if we're not aware of it, we're still creating. Our thoughts are creative energies. And so all day, every day, when I choose a thought, I'm helping to set up the energy that's going to create my tomorrow, that's going to bring things to me tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And so every time I use anger to cope with a pain or a threatening situation, I help to ensure that I'm going to have more situations tomorrow and the next day and the next day that are going to trigger the response of anger in me.
Until we can remove it.
Until we can use the tools that are given, as Michael says in many of his talks, all of the above. You do meditation, you do a mind shifter, you do the reality management worksheet, you do the memories of the 3 earliest memories of conflict, and each of these are tools that help me see the hidden and suppressed parts of my mind where I'm holding on to the energy that's actually creating the pain I'm experiencing. The pain I experience does not come from outside of me, no matter how much my eyes and my mind want to tell me that Sarah did this to me, or Bob's at fault, or this person who stole my television is causing me to be angry. I can't experience any emotion or feeling unless, as Michael says, it's already in my physiology. And I would extend that to say, unless it's in my mind-body energy system. And that goes beyond my physiology. It goes into all of my mind energy and all of my unconscious memories, physical memories of past trauma, etc. That's where my pain and suffering comes from, not from something someone else did or said or didn't say or didn't do.
Right. Someone in the chat room just asked if we could explain the difference between anger and hostility.
Well, I think it's
one
probably just a matter of...
One extreme of the other?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of degree. I would offer that it's just a matter of degree. There might be people who have different and therefore potentially useful definitions for it, but anger, I would think, would be a more overt expression of an underlying negative energy, which would be hostility. Or hostility might be the umbrella term under which an abrupt, angry expression could be one specific form of that energy.
That's a good definition of it. And so there's now a comment out there. It says fear and love are two true polarities. I would agree with that. And then that the anger covers the fear. So the anger or the hostility and fear kind of go together, and they are the total opposite of love.
Yeah, I think it's a very similar thing to, it's analogous to what Bruce Lipton talks about when he says that every cell has its own intelligence, and each cell can either only be in a health and growth mode or a defense and shutdown mode. Well, my mind as an entity can either only be in love, which means true acceptance of what is and compassion, or in judgment. And if I'm in judgment of something, I've either decided that it is fearful or hostile. Right. So I would agree with that assessment that there is only love or fear, as Course in Miracles talks about and Way of Mastery talks about, as general categories of this energy.
Right. Go ahead.
I find it very useful to add the concept of judgment and to be monitoring myself for every instance where I'm judging myself or someone else, and realizing that in that moment I am not in love. I am not in the energy of love. I have moved now to the position of a decision that someone or something else doesn't have the right to exist. So it's a very violent thing, and at one level, to judge anyone or anything. And it reinforces the dream of separation. It reinforces my, as Einstein would say, my optical delusion that I'm different from other people every time I judge anyone or anything.
Right. I was thinking when you were talking about the, I don't even remember now what you said that keyed it in, but there is a story that Michael shares sometimes in the workshops about being in either a protect mode, like a survival mode, or in a productive mode. And he uses the example of a city that, everything's going along great. The milkman runs, the trash pickup guy comes by, and, the stores are open. Everything's in production mode. And then an announcement made that there's, going to be a bomb dropped or whatever, and everybody jumps into shelters and hides in there. and they stay in this protect mode, so they're not being productive, and they can survive that way for so long. But then after a while, the trash starts building up and things start smelling, and, and that life can't stay in that protect mode all the time, because it would ultimately destroy itself. It has to move back into the productive mode. And we actually have 2 callers calling in, so let's see what they have to say. 417, you're on the air.
Hi, it's Terry again. I was wondering if I could get. Hey, I wanted to get Tim to repeat that statement, Bruce Lipton's statement. I didn't catch that. The notes on that. Every cell has its own intelligence. What was that again? If you could
Bruce Lipton in his book Biology of Belief talks about his research as a cellular biologist, which revealed to him that there is an intelligence outside of the cell that helps to dictate what the cell does, and that it used to be, there's a theory called the primacy of DNA, and that theory says that our DNA determines us, so it's kind of fatalistic. It's whatever I got from my mom and my dad creates who I am, how tall I am, my hair color, my eyes, etc. He learned through his research that the nucleus of the cell that holds the DNA, which was formerly thought to be the brain of the cell, is not the brain of the cell. The brain of the cell, the intelligence of the cell, is contained in an energy field within the membrane. And the membrane actually makes decisions to move away from poisons or physical danger or toward nutrition. And the membrane decides which molecules it will let pass into the cell, where they can then trigger the nucleus and the DNA to produce certain parts that might help repair it or help it evolve. And he learned that each cell has the ability to be either in this shutdown mode, as Jeannie was saying, in the bomb shelter, in the bunker, where it doesn't take in food and it doesn't eliminate waste. It's just shut down to protect itself. Or it's in a health and growth and healing mode, where it will take in food, eliminate waste, and repair itself. It can't be in both modes at the same time. And a very interesting thing and a powerful part of his work was he learned that there are receptors on the membrane that will get information about chemicals that might be damaging or physical danger that might be hindering it, but also that reads the mind energy, and that the mind energy of the individual overrides the physical information. So that if a person thinks they are in danger, the cells in their body go into shutdown mode, even if there's no danger. And this is why the effects of long-term stress are so damaging to us as human beings, and why it's a really good thing to choose the mode of love and acceptance over judgment, fear, and hostility. Does that cover it for you, Terry?
Excellent.
It is very good. And I want to thank you again, Tim. We're down to just about a minute. If you've got something else you want to add to wrap it up. But
I'm just going to thank you for the opportunity to share and let you wrap up the show and tell you I'll talk to you again soon.
All right, Tim, thank you so much for being part of it with us.
You're very welcome.
We appreciate your support. Okay, love you. Bye.
Bye.
And so, everybody, this is MindShifter Radio with Dr. Michael Ryce, the Forgiveness Doctor. We are Monday through Friday from 1 to 2 Eastern Time, and we want to thank everybody in the chat room and everybody that called in, and even those that didn't have questions but just listened. We're glad that you're part of what we're doing. And keep an eye on our website at www.whyagain, WHYAGAIN, whyagain.com. And we're now getting, besides our Facebook, we have some blog pages under the Forgiveness Doctor, and just keep an eye on the website because there's so much stuff going so fast, it's like I can't hardly keep up with it. And we hope that you can join us again tomorrow. And thank you again for participating with us, and have the most awesome day. as Michael would say, the best day yet of your eternal life. Thank you, and God bless.